All right, since I'm not streaming, I thought this would be kind of cool to just talk about some of my favorite viewer submitted decks. Now, I want to just preference right out of the gate that I just kind of pick these off of decks that I would actually build in paper. And I'm trying to limit it down to 5, but as you'll see, there's a lot. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you to everybody who does submit decks to me. I love looking at these lists. If a deck you've submitted me is not in this video, then I do apologize. Don't take it personal or anything like that. I really enjoy seeing the deck list. I really enjoy playing them, and I haven't gotten to hardly even half of what's been submitted. So I'm still churning my way through stuff. So there might be decks I come across later down the road. But these are decks that have really stood out to me that I had a blast playing that I would really consider building in paper. And I also try to keep it limited to like one per person because I know I have a few in my community looking at you, Darius, and Raging Bull who are overachievers in the sense of they make a ton of decks that are really interesting. Very creative people who are constantly trying to figure out new cards and interactions. And I just love looking at the constant stream of lists. If you want to see some of these awesome lists, you can consider becoming a member and joining our Discord server where there is a ton of stuff in there. 99 cents a month, not too bad. But anyway, let's talk about some honorable mentions in a way. There's a lot of stuff that's been out that I've played that I've really, really enjoyed. And one of them is Mono Blue Sack. This is a deck that relies on sacrificing your own creatures to control our opponent's board. This is not a list that we have played recently. I'm not entirely sure we've played this version of the list. This is submitted by Mike or user, bunch of names and numbers that's based on Darius and Raging Bull's deck. The idea is you're playing creatures that you can exploit with cards like Abjure and other things like Perilous Research to have like a nice control board. Cards like Wretched Throngs replaces itself, and cards that die draws itself, so you have a lot of draw power. Abjure is just super powerful, and it's really, really fun. It's an interesting shell for a blue shell, and I had a lot of fun playing it. All these decks, too, that's another thing is I only pick decks that I've covered on the channel, so there's a good chance I really like a list and haven't checked it out. There's one in particular on the Discord server that is a Reanimator list that I think looks amazing. That could probably be in this list, but I haven't got to it yet. Also, these have to be submitted by a viewer. So, like lists I've pulled, I haven't ran yet. So, there's that. Jun Kalvu is another honorable mention. I just played this recently. This was a list when I saw it. I just really loved it. It really piqued my interest. Horn Kalvu is just such a cool card, and so is Lava Zombie. Didn't run super amazing. Also, Bull has in the Discord server really changed this list up. But I just like the creatures. Just turn things sideways and bounce creatures for more value. Just cool. It's a little clunky at some points, but it's just on paper, this looks like what I want to do in Magic. Another honorable mention is a wacky deck by Pexuman called Esper Nightmare Combo. This is a crazy combo deck where Wormfang Drake and Grim Guardian can bounce creatures, and you just kind of keep bouncing stuff over and over and over again. This was a list that when I first played it, I wasn't entirely sure what the combos were, and I've been meaning to come back and replay this for a while because I loved how this deck just kind of interacted. And then also, we finally kind of figured out what some of the combos are. So like with like, you need multiples, but like if you have like Wormfang Drake and Faithless Butcher, you can use Drift of Phantasm to find Wormfang Drake too. But you can like mill your opponent, you can burn your opponent for damage. Is it Faceless? Okay, Faceless Butcher's the flick card and Grim Guardian's the burn card. Sorry, I had that backwards. So you can just like, you know, kind of go infinite, and I think you can go infinite. I'm pretty sure you can, but you need multiples. And it's just cool. It's just a really wacky deck that is a lot of fun to pilot and really, really weird to pilot. But it just always stuck out to me. I need to play this deck again. Now into our top 5 that apparently I didn't pick 5 of. These are not in any like specific order either. I just wanted to pick 5 because it seemed like the easiest to like get a video through with. But we have Golgari Graves. Now there is a slight asterisk next to this one because this wasn't really viewer submitted. This was White Lotus covered this and kind of introduced me into the deck, and I was like, this is a lot of what I want to do. This is a green-black Golgari graveyard deck where the whole entire idea is everything you play mills into your graveyard and use that for value. So you have cards like Branchwood Prowler, which is a 1/1 for 2 that when it enters the battlefield, you mill 3 cards. You may put a land card from among the cards milled this way into your hand. If you don't, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So a lot of the time you're just milling up your graveyard and making it a 2/2. Eerie Soul Tender is a card I've cast a bunch. I think this card's amazing. It's a 3-drop 3/1 that when it enters the battlefield, it mills 3 cards, but you can tap 5 to exile it to return another creature card from your graveyard to your hand. We're not playing Tortured Existence in this deck, so Eerie Soul Tender is kind of a nice little Torex package, and it's a good card to mill over, and it's a pretty good card to just play and mill. Gorging Vulture is awesome. This is a 3-drop 2/2 flyer that when it enters the battlefield, put the top 4 cards of your library into the graveyard. You can gain 1 life for each creature you put in this way. 3 Gurmag Anglers, pretty self-explanatory, just kind of eats up the graveyard. 1 Masked Vandal is a nice utility card. When it enters the battlefield, you can exile a card from your graveyard, creature card from graveyard. If you do, exile target artifact or enchantment. So it deals well with Bogles, deals well with Affinity. Could work well against Boros too. 4 Priests of the Haunted Edge is our pseudo removal in the deck. This is a 2-drop 0/4 that you sacrifice it, and it target creature gets -X to end a turn where X is the number of snow lanes you control. Activate this ability only when you could cast a sorcery. So it's kind of slow, but it's a pseudo removal spell. 4 State Away Finders just fills up the graveyard nicely, finds our lands. Werebear and Writhing Necromass is kind of beats. Werebear is a 1/1 for 2 that you can tap to add 1 green mana. But if it has Threshold, which means if there's 7 or more cards in our graveyard, it gets +3/+3. So it's kind of a 4/4 for 2. It's also worth noting Commander Masters is not out yet, and I think this deck will change with Commander Masters, but for right now. 4 Writhing Necromass. This is just an awesome card. It's a 5/5 with Death Touch that costs 1 less for each creature in your graveyard, almost always costing 1 in this deck. Then you have 2 Crawl from the Cellars. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Put a +1/+1 counter onto a zombie you control. Flashback for 4 does the same thing. So if you mill over this, it's not out of the woods. You're obviously going to be picking up Necromass or Gurmag Angler, depending on your situation, probably more than often Writhing Necromass. We have 3 Knot of the Bones in the main board, which is just insanely powerful. We are a deck that can grind out better than I think most other decks. So if we can just keep going and not die, thanks to Knot of the Bone, we will probably end up winning. 4 Seed of Hope kind of mills 2. You may put a permanent card from among those milled into your hand. You gain 2 life. This is nice because it allows you to pick up whatever permanent. So if you mill over a creature you need or you mill over a land you need, boom, and you gain 2 life. 1 Jungle Hollow for a mana base. 3 River Tier Overlooks helps thin our deck out to find our land so we don't mill over them as much. 5 Snow-Covered Forest, 7 Snow-Covered Swamps for some for some snowlands, and 4 Woodland Chasms also for snowlands. Sideboard wise, we have 3 Crypt Rats. Pretty self-explanatory. Crypt Rats is awesome. 2 Fairy Macaques for graveyard, 3 Masked Vandals for the artifact enchantments, 2 Spell Bombs for more graveyard, including an extra Tormod Crypt, and 4 Rancid Earths for Tron or Gates. Because what's interesting about this is not only destroy target land, this could also be used against Ponza for the Utopia Sprawl lands. Instead, destroy that land and it deals 1 damage to each creature and each player. So it could also be brought in as a board wiper. So that's Golgari Graves. This is not White Lotus's list. He did an amazing video on this. Please check out his video on this. I've covered this on the channel too. I've streamed this before. I just think this deck's really cool, and even though it's not necessarily viewers like a viewer's list or a viewer submission in a way, I never would have known about this list probably if it wasn't for White Lotus. So I'm going to include it because this deck is wickedly cool. Up next is a cool combo deck that I recently streamed, and this is Mirkwood Bats. This, or treasure combo, I don't know what you want to call it, right? But this deck is super cool and a lot of fun. So if you know what this deck is, it is based around Mirkwood Bats to win the game. So what is Mirkwood Bats? Well, it's a 3/4 2/3. I mean, it's a 4-drop 2/3 flyer that whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. You combine that with Reckless Fireweaver, which is a 1/3 that whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under control, Reckless Fireweaver deals 1 damage. Things stack up very quickly. The rest of our creatures, we have 4 Impulsive Pifflers, or Piflers, or however you say it. This is a 1/1 Goblin for 1 that when it dies, create a treasure token. But the exciting thing is Encore. Encore for 4, exile this card from your graveyard. For each opponent, create a token copy that attacks that opponent this turn if able. They gain haste, sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step, activate only as a sorcery. So, if you have a Mirkwood Bats on the field, Piffler comes in, you created a token, 1 damage. You could attack with it, 2 damage. Sacrifice it, 1 damage. Get a treasure token, 1 damage. Sacrifice treasure token, 5 damage off of just this 1 card if you have a Mirkwood Bats. If you have just Reckless Fireweaver, it's only 1 damage. Not that impressive. But with the Mirkwood Bats, it's a lot of damage. You could also just main phase this too. So that way, if they have some kind of interaction or a way to block it, it just comes into the battlefield and then you immediately sacrifice it. It doesn't do as much damage. Still pretty good. He has Shambling Gas, which is just an awesome 1/1 that when it dies, you can Brave the Stench, which means target creature gets an opponent controls gets -1/-1 until in a turn, or you can search the body, which creates a treasure token. 95,000% of the time we are searching the body, but Brave the Stench is relevant when it's needing to be. And then you have your combo pieces, Mirkwood Bats, Reckless Fireweaver. This deck's probably going to change when Commander Masters comes out because you have the, Nidar Nightblade, which will be a nice addition. But they had Marut, which is an 8-drop 7/7 Trampler that when it enters the battlefield, if mana from a treasure was spent to cast it, create a treasure token for each mana a treasure spent to cast it. So in theory, let's say you have like 4 treasure tokens and you have a Mirkwood Bats on the field, right? Sacrifice 4 treasure tokens, 4 damage from Mirkwood Bats. Marut enters battlefield, creates 4 more. That's 4 more damage. Sacrifice them. That's 4 more damage. That's 12 damage. This is just a random I win the game now card. Now, this is submitted by Moist Moose, and they said that they've actually been changing out Marut for Nadir Nightblade and leaving in I can't remember if they said 1 or 2 copies. I'd have to look. When we played this deck, Marut is not available on Magic Online, which is bullshit, but it's not. So what we did was we went up 2 Annihilating Glares and 2 Unexpected Windfalls. However, afterwards, somebody's like, why don't you play Gixin Infiltrator? And you're like, duh. So if I was running this deck without Nadir Nightblade being out and about, I would probably put in Gixin Infiltrator. But let's talk about the rest of the deck real quick. Annihilating Glare is a 1-drop sorcery that as an additional cost to cast a spell, you can pay 4 or sacrifice an artifact or creature, destroy target creature or planeswalker. What I like about this is you don't have to sacrifice an artifact or a creature to play this like Bone Shards. You can actually just have 5 mana and just hard cast it for 5. I like that. Over here, for instance, we have Big Score. This is a 4-drop. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card, draw 2 cards, and create 2 treasure tokens. So every time you cast Big Score or Unexpected Windfall, it is 4 damage to your opponent if you have Mirkwood Bats on the field. It's 2 damage if you have Reckless Fireweaver. If you have both, it's 6 damage. Because Mirkwood Bats does 4, would do 2 for each of them entering, and then you can immediately sacrifice them to do 2 more damage. 4 Deadly Disputes, which is just crazy good in this deck. As initial cost to cast a spell, sacrifice an artifact or a creature. Anytime we sacrifice an artifact, Mirkwood Bats will deal damage to them. Anytime an artifact enters the battlefield, Reckless Fireweaver will deal damage to them. Deadly Dispute creates a treasure token. A Deadly Dispute could potentially burn our opponent for 3 on its own. With just a Mirkwood Bats. This is how crazy this is, right? 4 Galblast for reach, some board control if need be, mainly reach. We're not really interacting with our opponent that much in terms of that. We're kind of just blocking with Shambling Gas, Piffler. we're trying to just pop off, right? We're just trying to blow up with Mirkwood Bats and Reckless Fireweaver. 2 Reckoner's Bargain, gain some life, draw some cards. Simple. Another Unexpected Windfall, which does the exact same thing as Big Score. They're the exact same card. Last but not least, that isn't a land, is Prize Statue, which is crazy good in this matchup. Prize Statue, when it enters the battlefield or is put into the graveyard from battlefield, create a treasure token. So, playing Prize Statue will deal 2 damage to our opponent with Reckless Fireweaver. It will deal 2 damage with a Mirkwood Bats on the field. It can deal 4 damage for 2 if there's both on the field. It can deal a bunch of damage as a Deadly Dispute target or as a Reckoner's Bargain target. It is really good. It's really good. To round off our lands, we are Rakdos. We are running 4 Vault of Whispers, 4 Great Furnaces, artifact lands that can be targets for Galblast or Deadly Dispute, but also entering the battlefield triggers Reckless Fireweaver, which is really relevant. 6 mountains and 6 swamps. No tap mountains. You do not want any tap lands in this deck. I'm telling you now, you don't want any of them. You want to be on curve. You want to be fast. You want turn 1 plays between Shambling Gas and Pulse of Piffler, or potentially Galblast. You don't want to, but could be. And then you want turn 2 plays like Prize Statue, Deadly Dispute, Reckoner's Bargain. And then hopefully now you have some treasure tokens. And then you want to try to get into Reckless Fireweaver, Mirkwood Bats, yada yada. You do not want tap lanes in this deck. Sideboard wise, we have 3 Breath Weapons to slow our opponent down, 3 Chainer Edicts for those Bogle matchups, 3 Circle of Protection Red, which is pretty solid to protect ourselves from burn, 3 Nile Spellbombs, and 3 Pyroblasts to round out the deck. This deck is really cool. I will be building this in paper at some point because I think this deck is really fun, and I really want to play Marut because I think that would just be awesome with this deck. I think this deck's really, really fun. I really enjoy it, and if you give it a shot, hopefully you'll like it, and hopefully you'll get even better with Commander Masters. And hopefully we'll get Marut and Magic Online. Up next is a longtime staple, and this is Hijack Hijinks. This deck has had many iterations over the time, but I think there's very few interactions in the entire game that isn't as fun as stealing your opponent's creature and then immediately attacking them with it and then sacrificing it. I don't think there's hardly anything as fun. This is not a very great deck because I think anytime you're in the situation you need 2 cards to do one thing is probably not the best, but it is insanely satisfying. So let's talk about Hijack Hijinks. Hijack has been taken out of the deck as times went on, but let's talk about our Hijack package. Our entire plan of this deck is to constantly steal our opponent's creatures, attack them with them, and then sacrifice them for our own advantage. So we have cards like Wrangle, which is probably the best Hijack card in the format. Gain control of target creature with power 4 or less till end of turn. Untap it. It gains haste until end of turn. 2 Mark of Mutiny. Gain control of target creature until end of turn. Put a +1/+1 counter on it and untap it. That creature gains haste to end of turn. And then 2 Bloody Betrayals. Gain control of target creature to end of turn. Untap it. It gains haste until end of turn. Created blood token. So that's our steal package. Pretty simple stuff. The thing with Hijack is you can steal an artifact with Hijack, but I think we want to utilize cards better. Treasure tokens allows us to draw more. Mark of Mutiny allows us to get in some extra damage. We have our sack outlets, which is Viscera Seer, Carrion Feeder for creatures. Carrion Feeder can't block. It is a 1/1 for 1 that you can sacrifice it, put a +1/+1 counter on Carrion Feeder. So we can sacrifice their creature to grow even more. Viscera Seer is a 1/1 for 1 that you sacrifice a creature and scry 1. So again, stealing our opponent's creatures for our own benefit. Just to round off our creature package real quick, we have 3 copies of Gurmag Angler, just as a nice top-end card. Our instants, we have 3 cast downs to just clean up a board that we can't deal with. 4 Galblast for reach. And then we have even more sack outlets between Deadly Dispute and Reckoner's Bargain. And then we also have Experimental Synthesizer to help us out a little bit to find stuff. And then 2 Makeshift Munitions as a nice onboard deal with our opponent's creatures. Works really nicely in the deck. Sideboard wise, we have Bloodfell Caves. Enters battlefield, gain a life. 2 Bojuka Bogs to blow up graveyards. 4 Great Furnaces. 3 Mountains. 2 Rakdos Canariums to bounce Bojuka Bog or Bloodfell Caves. 4 Swamps and 4 Volta Whispers. Using these artifact lands as targets for like Deadly Dispute if need be. Sideboard wise, we have 3 Feed the Swarms. 3 Gorilla Shamans. 4 Red Elemental Blast. 3 Serrated Scorpions for the burn matchup. And 2 Suffocating Fumes. I feel like most of the sideboard to this is pretty obvious. We've played a bunch of variations of Hijack Hijinks. We've played Mono Red Theft. We've done a lot. I'm including this one. I think any deck that allows you to abuse your opponent by stealing their creatures and sacrificing them is just a ton of fun. But I think like this version is, to me on paper, the most enjoyable because I love Carrion Feeder, I love Viscera Seer, I love Deadly Disputing away our opponent's creatures to draw 3 for ourselves. So like there's a lot here that I like personally. I think the mono red is probably more consistent, but I think the Rakdos Hijack Hijinks, the original idea of Hijack Hijinks, is just a lot of fun. Up next is another deck that was a pet deck of the channel for a while, and this is Esper Blade. This deck is really cool, but in a very poor situation due to pretty much how relevant artifacts are. This is also a deck that if there's like a major artifact banning, such as the artifact lands, probably wouldn't work anymore. So it's a very niche deck that kind of works like a combo deck, and I love it. So if you don't know what this deck is, it relies on Glaze Fiend and Mandible Justicar to just obliterate our opponent. Arcbound Mauser is a 1-drop lifelinker with modular, just a good strong card. Same thing with Vault Scourge. You play it for 1, it's got lifelink and flying. Just a good creature package, cheap creature package for this artifact. We are heavy into artifacts, as you'll see. We're playing a million of them. But let's talk about Glaze Fiend and Mandible Justicar. Glaze Fiend, this deck spawned from a Esper artifact lifelink deck. So we were originally just working with every creature had lifelink. Now we're working with a combo, basically. Glaze Fiend is whenever another artifact enters battlefield, it gets +2/+2 to end a turn. Mandible Justicar is a 2/1 lifelink. Also has flying. Glaze Fiend has flying. Mandible Justicar is a 2-drop 2/1 lifelink that when another artifact enters battlefield under control, Mandible Justicar gets +1/+1 to end a turn. And we are just playing a litany of artifacts. 4 Thoughtcast to draw even more cards. It's really our only blue besides our sideboard. 3 Cast Downs to deal with our creature stuff. 4 Deadly Disputes to draw a bunch of cards to find our gas. 4 Blood Fountains. 4 Great Swords. 4 Scale and 4 Tooth. I want to just go over this because I want to go one by one. Blood Fountain is insane in this deck. We are playing a low creature count. So Blood Fountain being able to get our creatures back is very strong. But Blood Fountain enters the battlefield. It's a double trigger for 1 for both Glaze Fiend and Mandible Justicar. So it's only a +2/+2 for Mandible. It is a +4/+4 for Glaze Fiend. Great Sword of Tyr is powerful. To me, this is one of the best cards in Pauper. It's slept on besides like our community. This is a 2-drop sword equipment that when an equipped creature attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it and tap up to 1 target creature defending player controls. Equip is 1, so it's really a 3-drop. But it triggers Glaze Fiend, triggers Adjustable Mandible Justicar, but it grows these guys very quickly. Great Sword is a very fast snowball that, yeah, it may start off as not much, but that really snowballs out of control very, very quickly. And a lot of people do not respect the sword enough. And I think when you play this and it goes unanswered for a while, it's insane how powerful it is. Then we have Scale of Chisgora and Tooth of Chisgora, both out of 4 of. These are the combo pieces. This is a 0-drop in a 0-drop. There are 3 drops, but they have affinity for artifacts. If you have to cast these for a price, we're not doing well. Every creature is an artifact. Every land's an artifact. Every artifact's an artifact. Right? Scale of Chisora is more powerful in this deck than Tooth. The reason for that is you can play these at any time that you have an instant, so they're flash abilities. But target creature gets +0/+1 from Scale. This deck is really weak to In the Festivities, really weak to board wipers. Not only does these entering the battlefield trigger both Mandible and Glaze Fiend, so they'll grow on their own out of the board wiper. You can use it on Volt Scourge and Arcbound Mauser when it hits the field, because all you have to do is tap it. So it grows these guys out too to save through board wipers. However, more importantly, you can just flash these in mid-combat. So they decide not to block. Flash it in, boom, your guys are huge now. Just hit for a ton of damage out of nowhere. Tooth of Chesgora is the same thing as Scale, except for it gives +1/+0 instead of +0/+1. Which can be relevant to get in that extra damage. Can be relevant to get that extra lifelink. A lot of our cards do have lifelink still. So it's relevant. Our mana base is wickedly greedy. Every land is an artifact land. So we have 4 Ancient Dens, 4 Goldmire Bridges, 4 Mistvault Bridges, 2 Razortide Bridges, 2 Seat of the Schnood, and 3 Volta Whispers. Everything here is here to trigger Glaze Fiend and Mandible Justicar, and to get Infinity on Scale and Tooth. So we are very weak to Dust to Dust, very weak to Cast into Fire, kind of weak to Gorilla Shaman. A lot of our lands are indestructible, but we are weak, right? We're weak to a lot of this stuff. Sideboard wise, we have 2 Arms of Hadar. It's a one-sided board wiper. 1 Chainer's Edict, 4 Hydroblasts for the red matchup, 2 Recommissions for the heavy removal matchup, 4 Revoke Existence for artifact or enchantment matchups, and 2 Veldikin Outlanders for the burn matchup. It is actually surprising how good this card is against burn. Like, no joke, this card's really good against burn. Especially like if you can put like a greatsword onto it or something. It's pretty good. So that is Esper Blade. If we were in a format where Affinity and Boros Synth wasn't as prevalent as they are, this could be a lot more viable, because there's a lot of power here, but it is very weak to interaction. So just something to note. Last but not least, and that was also by Raging Bull. Last but not, and Hijack Hijinks was from Darius. I don't know if I said names. I was trying to say names for everything, but I don't feel like I was keeping up with it very well, so I apologize. Last but not least is Mono Black Paper Cut, submitted by Pexuman. This is a list playing 2 cards that has been on my pet list ever since I found them, and that is Ill-Gotten Inheritance and Dogged Pursuit. I'm an 8-rack player. I've played a lot of 8-rack, right? This is basically Pauper 8-rack in a way. Dog Pursuit is a 4-drop enchantment at the beginning of your end step. Each opponent loses a life, you gain a life. And Ill-Gotten Inheritance is a 4-drop enchantment that has the same ability, but also has, you can pay 6 to sacrifice, and it deals 4 damage to target opponent, and you gain 4 life. Now, what are we doing with this deck outside of that? Well, we're playing these, right? But then we're using a bunch of other cards to bleed our opponent to death and control the board. Another card we can use to bleed our opponent is Trespasser's Curse, as a 4-of. Enchant player, whenever a creature in his battlefield under enchanted player's control, that player loses 1 life, you gain 1 life. It's amazing how much damage this card actually gets in, especially in multiples. Then for our other enchantments, we have Oblete. I don't know how you say this. It's a 3-drop enchantment that is basically Journey to Nowhere. Enters battlefield, target creature phases out until it leaves. Tap that creature as it phases in this way. So just control piece. For instances, we have 4 cast downs, 3 Phyrexia's Libation, which has since been changed to Debt to Kami. I guess I haven't updated it here. Debt to Kami does basically the same thing, but it's better. 3 Unmakes. So just a lot of creature removal here. 3 Chainer's Edict for even more creature removal. Invocar's Justice. This is, you want to pay this with buyback. It deals 2 damage to each creature and each player. So you're like slowly burning out your opponent and you're buying it back every turn. Topping that with Dogged Pursuit, Ill-Gotten Inheritance, and Trespasser's Curse. Then you also have 2 Crypt Rats to just blow up the board. Could be used to just finish a game out depending on how many lands you have. But it's here to kind of just keep the board under control. You have also 4 Sign in Bloods to draw even more cards. But then you have Pristine Talisman. This is a 3-drop mana rock that anytime you tap it, you get a colorless mana and you gain a life. So the idea is you're going to be using this to constantly keep your life up while also gaining mana off of it. So between this, Trespasser's Curse, Dog Pursuit, and Ill-Gotten Inheritance, you're just drawing the game out. You're potentially gaining 3 or 4 life a turn. So you're just drawing the game out while you're using Invocar's Justice or Crypt Rats mixed with Dog Pursuit and Ill-Gotten Inheritance to close the game out. Mana-wise, you have 2 Barren Moors, 2 Bojuka Bogs, 1 Silverquill Campus, 15 Swamps, and 1 Witch's Cottage to pick back up Crypt Rats. Pretty simple. Sideboard-wise, we have 4 Duress to just pick apart. Combo decks if need be, control decks, burn decks. 4 Grays that we will bring in for the burn matchup. This is a 2/4 that for 5 that when it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion in black. We can clearly get quite a bit of devotion between our group of enchantments. 3 Nile Spell Bombs to deal with sideboard, and then 4 Okiba Reckoner Raids, which I'm like super... This is one of my favorite cards in all of Pauper. It's got to be in my top 10, if not top 5. One of my favorite cards in the entire format. Each opponent loses a life, you gain a life. Exile this card, return to the battlefield transformed. Comes back with a 2/2 Menace. You're bringing this in pretty much against Monarchy and Initiate decks. Because with Menace, you can steal it, and then you have all the control to like try to hold it down. So that's kind of what your plan is. When I last played this, I thought this deck was actually really, really cool. I would like to build this in paper. I just love Dog Pursuit and Ill-Gotten Inheritance. These are 2 cards that I just have loved since I've seen them come out. So yeah, I just thought it'd be fun to talk about some of the decks that y'all have submitted that I've really, really loved. I mean, look at some of these. Most of these are decks I played on screen. Not all of them, but most of them. You can follow me on Moxfield if you want to. Yeah, there's just been a lot of awesome decks. I can't thank this community enough for being as awesome as they are, submitting these decks and watching me blunder through them. I really appreciate it. The community, there's even more decks in the Discord community. Everybody in that community has been so cool, so awesome to like help each other like build these decks out. And I love a lot of these decks that's been submitted. It's been really fun to keep playing stuff, to keep decks, a fresh list of decks to try out and to play. And while not all of them work, they're typically almost always interesting. And I just wanted to highlight some of the decks that I've really loved that I would like to build in paper. And again, if you've submitted a deck to me that didn't make this list, I do apologize. I hope you don't take it personal. I appreciate so much. There's so many decks I could have picked for this. And there's been a ton of decks that even I did some honorable mentions that were ones that I would also build in paper. But I guess if I was going to keep it to 5 just sounds like a better title than like 8. You know what I mean? Because there's other decks like Big Bad Red, which was submitted by David Royale, I really enjoyed, which is somewhere around here. This is a deck I recently played. Avarax, I love this card. This card is so cool. There's decks like Abzan Persist Blade that I think is really cool. I can't wait to play the Undying version, but I thought this version was wickedly sick too. Like there's this is Persist Blade. I was talking about Abzan Mutate. Naya Wonderbread is also a really awesome one too. There's been a ton of awesome decks. I just can't thank this community enough for being as awesome as they are, and I'm going to bounce for today. If you want to join the membership and check out the Discord, there's a link in the description to join the membership, 99 cents a month or $1 a month. Get you access to that. And if you want to support the channel, the best way to do so for free is to just like, subscribe, share the video, and comment on the videos to help the algorithm and whatnot, and to spread the channel around. That's pretty much it. Thank you all so much for being an awesome community. I really appreciate y'all, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.